The letter came without warning, slipped under the door on a rainy Thursday evening. At first, I thought it was just another bill, another routine notice. But the thick envelope felt heavy, and my name was written in a hand I recognized, yet suddenly seemed alien. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a legal notice. My name was now tied to debts I had never incurred, accounts I had never signed for. My name is Patricia Kent. I am 63 years old, and I have spent decades believing in trust, in the partnership I thought Robert and I shared. We built our life together, made careful plans, and he insisted that every account, every utility, every mortgage, even small bills, be in my name. It's safer that way, he said, smiling that familiar smile I had always trusted. Now that smile seemed sinister, a mask hiding a truth I couldn't yet grasp. I remember the first time we bought our house. Robert argued that having everything under my name would make taxes and paperwork easier. I agreed, feeling honored by his confidence in me. At the time, I didn't see the seed of control buried in his words. That seed had grown into something dangerous, and I had no idea. The rain pattered on the windows, echoing the storm rising in my chest. A lifetime of trust felt like it had crumbled overnight. I wanted to call him, to ask, why? But my voice caught in my throat. Something was terribly wrong, and I could feel it in every nerve. This was not just about money. This was about betrayal, and it cut deeper than I could have imagined. When the phone rang, my stomach sank. It was the bank. "Patricia, we need to discuss Robert's accounts," the voice said. The words were calm, professional, but they hit like a hammer. All at once, I realized that I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion. And in that moment, I understood that my life, my security, and my peace had been quietly manipulated right under my nose. The next morning, I replayed every conversation, every financial decision Robert had insisted on. How he argued about joint accounts, how he smiled when I suggested his name be added to utilities. "It's simpler this way," he said, and I believed him. I had no idea that simpler was the perfect word to mask his intentions. Life with Robert had always seemed ordinary. We shared dinners, anniversaries, and quiet nights watching television. But small inconsistencies now gnawed at me. Bills arriving late, unexpected charges, accounts I didn't recognize. He laughed off my questions, dismissed my concerns, but the unease had taken root. Something was being hidden, and it was larger than I could guess. I began checking statements, comparing past patterns. Each discrepancy felt deliberate. Why would he insist all finances be under my name if not to shield himself from responsibility? The thought made my chest tighten. The very trust I had placed in him had become a tool for betrayal. I remembered a comment he made years ago during dinner. "Don't worry about the bills. You handle it, you're so good at it." At the time, it felt flattering. Now, it felt like manipulation, like rehearsed preparation. Fear mingled with anger, and I realized I had been living in someone else's carefully orchestrated plan. The first confrontation attempt was subtle. I asked casually about a credit card statement that didn't make sense. He smiled, calm, and said, "It's just a bank error. Don't worry, Pat." But the look in his eyes betrayed him, an invisible wall of secrecy and control. I felt the first real spark of determination. I would uncover every hidden move, every secret he thought I would never see. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of uncertainty pressed on me relentlessly. Every time Robert left the house, I found myself checking our accounts, combing through statements, and noting strange transactions I didn't recognize. A small withdrawal here, a late fee there, things that could be explained away, but the pattern gnawed at me. He smiled at me over breakfast as if nothing were wrong, but there was a tension in the air I couldn't ignore. I remembered how he had always been secretive with passwords, how he brushed off questions about minor bills, how he insisted I manage everything. At first, I had laughed it off as quirky habit, a harmless eccentricity. Now it felt like a well-rehearsed system designed to put me in charge while he stayed hidden. The more I looked, the more I realized he had set me up as the keeper of everything, the one responsible if anything went wrong. One evening, I tried to bring it up casually. "Robert, why don't you ever look at these bills with me?" I asked, trying to sound light-hearted. He chuckled. "I trust you, Pat. You always handle it better than I would." But the tone, too smooth, too polished, made my skin crawl. It was as if he had practiced that line for years. My knees deepened. Something was coming, something I wasn't ready for. Late at night, I lay awake, thinking of past conversations, noticing inconsistencies I had ignored. The feeling of betrayal began to seep into my bones. And I realized that the trust I had once cherished was now the tool of my own vulnerability. If Robert had a plan, I needed to be ready. Tension at home grew unbearable. Every shared meal, every casual conversation, became a minefield. I found myself double-checking what he said, recalling offhand remarks, searching for hidden meaning. The air between us was no longer comfortable. It was loaded, thick with something unspoken. I began noticing subtle manipulations. Small comments designed to make me doubt myself, tiny actions that seemed harmless but shifted responsibility squarely onto me. One evening, I found a receipt for an expensive purchase I didn't recognize. I asked him about it, and he gave that practiced shrug. "Oh, that? Must have been something I forgot to tell you. No big deal." But the no big deal felt like a taunt. The casual tone couldn't hide the intent. I realized he had built a careful web around me, one I was only starting to see. Sleep became restless. Fear mixed with frustration, anger laced with disbelief. I kept asking myself, how could I have been so blind? I trusted the man I loved with my whole life, and yet I was beginning to understand that the foundation of our marriage had cracks, deep ones, and I had walked over them without noticing. Every laugh, every smile, every reassurance suddenly carried weight, and I could feel the betrayal tightening its grip. The realization was slow, creeping. He had positioned me as the one legally and financially responsible, preparing for something I could not yet comprehend. I didn't yet know what his plan was, but the pieces were falling into place. I had to prepare, to arm myself emotionally and mentally, because what I would uncover next could destroy everything, or finally set me free. I started digging deeper. Every statement, every bill, every account became a puzzle I had to solve. Small charges turned into patterns, late payments became pieces of a bigger scheme. The more I uncovered, the more the image of the man I loved began to distort. Robert was meticulous, careful, almost surgical in his deception. One evening, I confronted him. "Robert, these accounts, why are they all under my name? Why didn't you tell me?" My voice trembled. He looked at me calmly, too calmly, and said, "Pat, it's for your protection. I didn't want to worry you." But the explanation felt hollow. I knew the truth was hidden behind that practiced smile. I found emails he had deleted from a shared computer, correspondence with unknown people about finances, investments, and debts. My heart sank. He had been moving money, shielding himself, preparing for a future that didn't include me, or maybe one where I would take the fall. The betrayal was not sudden. It had been decades in the making, buried under a life of domesticity and smiles. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed conversations, traced every financial decision, and felt the weight of years of trust being stripped away. My anger was sharp, cutting through my fear, fueling determination. I couldn't let him leave me with ruin, not after everything we had built. I had to fight, to uncover the full scope of his plan before it was too late. I started keeping detailed notes, creating spreadsheets, tracing every transaction Robert had hidden. Each discovery tightened the coil of anxiety around my chest. I realized he had been preparing for a long time, years of financial manipulation carefully hidden behind mundane domestic routines. One afternoon, I found a bank statement I hadn't seen before, tucked between old documents. The numbers didn't make sense. Large transfers, offshore accounts, debts in my name that I had never authorized. My hands shook as I called the bank to verify. Every word confirmed my fear. Robert had been setting me up to take the fall. I confronted him again, more directly this time. Robert, I found accounts and transfers I didn't know about. What is this? He paused, then gave a weak laugh. Pat, don't make this worse than it is. You don't understand. But I did understand. His calm demeanor was a mask. The man I trusted was capable of leaving me financially ruined without a second thought. Sleep became impossible. Fear mingled with anger and disbelief. I questioned every moment of our past. The smiles, the reassurances, the moments I thought were love. They were now shadowed by the realization that trust had been weaponized against me. And I knew I had to gather every fact, every detail, before making my next move. Because when I confronted him for the last time, I needed proof. I needed power. The next weeks felt like living in a storm. Every morning I woke with a knot in my stomach, anticipating the next lie, the next revelation. Robert acted as though nothing had changed, pouring coffee, humming in the kitchen, pretending our life was untouched. But I had discovered too much. Each new document I found, each email he thought I would never see, became a weapon in my mind, sharpening my understanding of what had been happening for decades. One night, I went through an old filing cabinet in our study, something I had avoided for years. Among dusty folders, I found receipts for purchases I didn't recognize, luxury vacations, gifts for people I had never met, payments to accounts overseas. And then I found it. A ledger meticulously detailing all his financial maneuvers, including loans and debts in my name that I had never authorized. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. This was the map of his plan, and it was worse than I had imagined. I confronted him in the living room, the papers trembling in my hands. Robert, what is this? Why are these accounts in my name? Why did you hide this from me? His expression didn't change. Calm. Controlled. Practiced. Pat, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand. I felt my chest tighten. This was more than deception. It was betrayal on a scale I had never fathomed. I realized he had been positioning me to take the fall while he stayed untouched, financially safe, and ready to vanish if needed. The emotional conflict consumed me. I remembered every time I had trusted him, every decision I had made thinking we were partners. But the truth was clear now. I had been the caretaker of his secrets, the one he could manipulate without consequence. My heart pounded as anger mixed with fear, frustration with disbelief. I couldn't just stand by anymore. I had to prepare, to arm myself with evidence, to think several moves ahead. Sleep eluded me. I replayed conversations, remembering his words and smiles, now tinged with deception. "It's for your protection," he had said countless times. But protection for whom? Not for me. The realization hit me like a blow. I had been groomed into a trap. I started to imagine the life he had planned for me. Me buried under debts I didn't know about, my reputation tarnished, my future stolen. And yet, amidst the fear, a spark of determination ignited. I would not be defeated. I would uncover everything, even if it destroyed our marriage, even if it destroyed him. In the coming days, I began recording, noting, documenting. Every email, every statement, every conversation became proof. I even reached out anonymously to the bank, inquiring about accounts I hadn't authorized, testing his reactions. He began to notice my scrutiny, the questions I asked, and a subtle tension emerged. For the first time, I sensed a crack in his armor. But I couldn't show weakness. Not yet. I had to stay calm, collected, and strategic. Then, one evening, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Hidden in his files was a document signed years ago, a legal authorization giving him indirect control over assets in my name. I realized then that his plan had not just been about hiding debts or transferring money. He had been preparing to leave me completely exposed, a scapegoat for a life of manipulation and deception. The betrayal wasn't just emotional or financial, it was strategic, calculated, and horrifying. The following days were relentless. I spent hours at the kitchen table, poring over documents, emails, bank statements. Each discovery compounded my shock. Robert had not only moved debts and hidden accounts, he had planned for a full disappearance, leaving me financially liable, my credit destroyed, my life in chaos. The realization hit like a sledgehammer. Everything I had trusted, every shared plan, every dream, had been underwritten by lies. I found evidence of secret loans, some in my name, some routed through shell corporations. There were transfers to offshore accounts I had never authorized. I even discovered a contract that suggested he had been negotiating a way to dissolve joint ownership of assets while keeping me responsible for all liabilities. The betrayal was not a simple secret. It was an entire system, meticulously designed to trap me. I confronted him once more, this time with documentation. "Robert, I have proof. I know what you've been doing. You've put everything in my name, debts, accounts, contracts. Explain this." His calm demeanor cracked for the first time. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes, quickly replaced by practiced indifference. "Pat, calm down. You're overreacting." But I had the evidence. The far day was gone. The emotional weight was unbearable. I remembered decades of shared life, vacations, anniversaries, everyday moments, and realized how many of them had been used to manipulate me. I questioned every memory, every gesture of love. And then I saw the final piece. A hidden account, containing funds meant for his escape. He had been planning for years to leave me with the fallout. Fear, shock, and anger collided inside me. How could I have been so blind? How could the man I loved, trusted, and built a life with, orchestrate such a complex betrayal? And yet, amidst the despair, I found clarity. I would not let him succeed. I would reclaim control, protect myself, and confront the system he had built around me. The game had changed. I was no longer a victim. I was ready to act. It was late at night when I finally understood the full scope of Robert's deception. I had spent weeks tracing every transaction, reviewing every account, every document, and now the picture was terrifyingly clear. He hadn't just hidden debts or transferred money to protect himself, he had methodically positioned me as the one who would take the fall for everything. Every joint account, every investment, every bill in my name was part of a carefully constructed trap. I remembered the times he insisted I handle the finances, saying it would be simpler or safer. I had trusted him, thought he was being practical, caring even. But each action had a hidden motive. He had been creating a web of control that only now revealed its full, sinister pattern. I confronted him once more, holding the evidence in my hands. Robert, I've traced everything. All the debts, all the transfers, every single account in my name. Why? How could you do this? His face shifted, not the calm Faraday I had seen before, but a flash of anger, a glimpse of fear. Pat, you don't understand the whole picture, he said, voice tight. It's not what it seems. But I did understand. I understood exactly what he was capable of, and I was no longer afraid. The weight of decades of lies hit me. I saw how much of my life had been manipulated. The vacations, the anniversaries, the home we shared, all part of a story he controlled, a narrative in which I was both unaware and trapped. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional, strategic, and total. I felt my chest tighten with a mix of rage and grief. I could hardly breathe, yet clarity shone through the fog. I had to act before he could make his next move. I started drafting a plan. Legal counsel, documentation, letters, records, everything had to be in order. I couldn't let him rewrite history or leave me responsible for his manipulations. And then, late that night, I found the ultimate revelation. A signed agreement, hidden among old tax returns, giving him the power to liquidate joint assets and leave me with all liabilities. That was the moment I realized he had been planning my ruin all along. Fear surged, but alongside it, a newfound determination. I would not be his victim. I would confront him publicly, legally, and emotionally. I would reclaim control over my life, my finances, my dignity. For the first time in years, I felt empowered, even as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation that would change everything. The confrontation couldn't wait any longer. I demanded he sit down in the living room, the papers spread before him like evidence of betrayal. Robert, I know everything, I said, voice steady but sharp. Every account, every transfer, every secret loan. I've traced it all. You cannot lie anymore. His calm Faraday finally cracked. I saw anger, panic, and, just for a fleeting moment, guilt. You think you understand? He spat, voice rising. You have no idea what I've done for us. I shook my head, incredulous. For us? You've been preparing to destroy me, to leave me financially ruined while you walk free. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. My fury was a shield, my clarity a weapon. I read aloud the hidden agreements, the secret accounts, the offshore transfers, everything meticulously recorded. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. He tried to interrupt, to explain, but I had anticipated every excuse, every deflection. For the first time, I saw him not as my husband, but as a man willing to betray decades of marriage for his own gain. The emotional weight was crushing. Anger, hurt, disbelief, and betrayal collided in my chest. I remembered our life together. The quiet mornings, the laughter, the promises. Each memory now stung, reframed by the knowledge of his manipulation. And yet, amidst the pain, I felt an extraordinary clarity. I would not be trapped. I would not be silenced. I would fight. I left the room, phone in hand, ready to contact legal counsel. For the first time, I felt power in my hands. This was the turning point. Robert had underestimated me, thought my trust was infinite. But trust alone would no longer be enough. I would act. I would reclaim everything he tried to take. And as I looked back at him, I knew one thing with certainty. The marriage I thought I knew was over, and nothing would ever be the same. I couldn't wait another moment. The weight of betrayal, the years of manipulation, the looming financial disaster, everything demanded confrontation. I called Robert into the living room again, this time with my legal notes, copies of all the documents, and a calmness that masked the fury inside me. "Robert," I began, voice steady, "I've had enough. I know every detail of your plan. The debts, the transfers, the hidden accounts, you underestimated me. It's over." He laughed, a bitter, nervous sound. "Pat, you don't understand," I cut him off. "No, I understand perfectly. I understand that you spent decades manipulating me, building a trap, planning your escape while I'd carry the consequences. And I won't let it happen." His eyes widened. For the first time, I saw him afraid. Not just angry, not just frustrated, truly afraid. I laid out the evidence systematically, calmly reading aloud the documents that had haunted my nights. Every secret account, every offshore transfer, every legal loophole was exposed. He stammered, tried to justify, tried to twist reality, but the far day had crumbled. The man I loved, or thought I loved, was revealed as a master manipulator, and there was no charm, no smile, no excuse that could undo the damage he had done. The realization hit me like fire. I had allowed myself to be used, to be a pawn in a carefully orchestrated game. But now, clarity replaced despair. I was no longer helpless. I demanded immediate actions. Reversal of accounts, freezing of transactions, contacting our lawyers. And as he sat there, pale and panicked, I finally felt a sense of control I hadn't experienced in decades. For hours we argued, we confronted, we laid bare every detail of our lives. My emotions were raw, rage, grief, betrayal, but also relief, empowerment, determination. I could see him unraveling in front of me, the man who once seemed untouchable now cornered, exposed, forced to answer for decades of deceit. That night, I realized one thing. The marriage I thought I knew was gone, but I was finally free to reclaim my life. The next morning, I began taking action. I contacted our attorney, explaining every detail and providing every document I had collected. The legal team was shocked at the complexity of Robert's plan, but immediately understood the urgency. Together, we started freezing accounts, reversing unauthorized transfers, and preparing formal actions to protect my financial security. I also began disentangling our life. Shared assets, joint properties, investments, all had to be separated or legally secured. I hired financial advisors to audit everything, ensuring nothing could be hidden from me again. Each step I took was empowering. For years, I had felt manipulated, trapped, and powerless. Now, with each decision, I reclaimed a fraction of the life that had been stolen from me. Emotionally, I was exhausted. The realization of what had happened, combined with the confrontation and the immediate need for legal and financial action, left me drained. But amidst the fatigue, I felt a surge of clarity and control. I was no longer the passive partner in a narrative written by Robert. I was an active force, reshaping the story of my life. The final act would not just be about finances, it was about setting boundaries, reclaiming dignity, and creating a life where trust could be rebuilt, cautiously but intentionally. I cut off unnecessary contact, established rules for communication, and began envisioning a future independent of the manipulation that had dominated my marriage. Each day, as I navigated the paperwork, phone calls, and meetings, I felt my sense of self returning. And yet, despite all the preparation and legal protections, a shadow remained. The fear of what he might attempt next, the uncertainty of lingering secrets, reminded me that control was never absolute. But now, armed with knowledge, resources, and determination, I felt ready to face whatever came. The power had shifted. I was no longer a victim. I was the architect of my own life, ready to write a future on my own terms. Weeks passed, and with every legal step, every financial correction, I felt a new version of myself emerge. The fear and confusion that had dominated my days were slowly replaced with clarity, strength, and a sense of control I had never imagined. I began to rebuild not just my finances, but my sense of self, my confidence, my boundaries. The house no longer felt like a trap. It was mine, truly mine, because I had taken back ownership of my life, my decisions, and my safety. I reflected on everything: the trust I had given, the lies I had endured, the manipulations I had missed. It was painful, of course. But the pain was now balanced with empowerment. I had survived deceit, betrayal, and emotional manipulation. I had confronted the man who had tried to ruin me and emerged stronger, wiser, and determined to never allow such control again. I realized that strength is not only about retaliation or reclaiming material possessions, it is about reclaiming your mind, your dignity, and your emotional sovereignty. Friends and family, once unaware of the truth, began to see the reality. Some were shocked, some disappointed, and some ashamed for having trusted him too. But I no longer sought validation from anyone. My focus was on the life I was building, a life where trust would be deliberate, not naive; love would be cautious, not blind, and independence would be unshakable. I felt a quiet pride in my resilience, in my ability to navigate through deceit and emerge unbroken. The experience changed me. I now understood the value of vigilance, the importance of financial literacy, and the necessity of asserting control over your own life. I set new boundaries, cut unnecessary ties, and cultivated relationships based on mutual respect and honesty. Even when reminders of the past surfaced, a bill mistakenly sent, a lingering doubt, a message from Robert, I faced them without panic. They no longer controlled me. I controlled them. And yet, there was a part of me that remained cautious, alert, and wise to the hidden motives of others. I had learned that even the closest relationships could mask deception, that trust must be measured, and that true empowerment comes from knowledge, preparation, and courage. Looking back, I realized that what had felt like a nightmare was, in fact, the most powerful lesson of my life. I had survived, I had grown, and I had claimed my freedom. For the first time in decades, I could breathe without fear. I could sleep without anxiety. I could live without the shadow of betrayal looming over me. And as I stepped into this new chapter, I knew one truth with certainty. I was no longer defined by the manipulations of my husband. I was defined by my courage, my clarity, and my ability to take charge of my own destiny. The life ahead was mine, fully, completely, and I was ready to embrace it without hesitation.